Hey, welcome back to the Ball and Breakfast podcast. We have a special edition for you today, different than our usual rundowns of the NFL weekly schedule, current events in NBA, MLB as well. We've got Stefano Montali here, a good friend, and also just somebody super interesting in the world of media, in the world of sports, podcasting, living abroad. There's a lot of things that he brings to the table here that I think will make for just a fun conversation, something that could be thought provoking to you folks listening out there for any kind of purposes. But just to kind of introduce him, he's the guy in the center there that is what you're seeing on your video or whatnot. But Stefano is a journalist and an audio producer. He's currently based in Berlin, Germany, originally from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He's had some really interesting pieces lately that have shown up for sports and FanSided. As well in major publications like The Guardian, BBC, Business Insider. He covers anything from sports to even just social issues across the world. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Stefano just to maybe talk about a couple of those pieces. I saw the one with Nkwain Kennedy, if I've got that name right, in basketball in Cameroon. And then also your one on Jabar and David in Afghanistan, the U.S. So if you'd like to just briefly touch on yourself and maybe those pieces or others, happy to let you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks Patrick and Wayne for having me too. Good way to spend a Sunday afternoon. So I've been in Berlin for a few years and really started getting into the journalism world about a year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years. I think one of the most interesting things about getting into it has just been like the way that stories pop up. The possibility for finding a story has, it just changes. At first, I kind of was scouring the internet, going on Reddit, just kind of trying to be inspired in a lot of different ways for, different storylines. But the story you mentioned that I did for FanSided a few months ago with Nkwain Kennedy, who basically is this 21-year-old guy in Bamenda, Cameroon, he basically started posting videos of himself just doing these insane basketball workouts, very makeshift, lifting water jugs and stones and playing on this kind of clay court in outside his hometown. And I found him, I think just on Instagram. I think it was just suggested to me. I watch a lot of NBA highlights. So I think the algorithm knew where to put him. And I found him, and he's got I think over 1 million followers on TikTok. Not that I'm on TikTok, but on Instagram too. So I contacted him, and very nice guy. He's basically has the goal of making the NBA. But we talked about a little bit about that, but also just kind of what it means to be someone who people around him can look up to. He just talked to me, a lot of people saying that a lot of people in Africa are online just watching videos, and that he, it's interesting because with Joel Embiid, Pascal Siakam, those are guys who also come from Cameroon. And so it's just interesting to hear. And, he told me this story. It's funny. I talked to him for an hour. And at the end, I usually ask, is there anything that I haven't asked that you think is important or that you want to mention? And he just casually throws in this story that Steph Curry follows him on Instagram, and Steph Curry follows less than 1,000 people and has 50 million followers himself. So I was like, that's so funny that he just didn't think that was important, but he's a very humble guy. So anyway, so that was a really cool piece. And actually, funnily enough, about 2-3 weeks ago, a film director and producer who's based in Berlin messaged me, just found my email, found the story, and is like, I've been trying to get in touch with this guy for a while, haven't gotten a response, but I want to make a documentary about him and his journey. So we've actually started working just the last couple of weeks about potentially doing something. So maybe potentially more to come about Nkwain. It could be really interesting. So there's a chance I'll be heading to Cameroon possibly next year. But I'm going to knock on wood because I don't want to curse that. But yeah, so that was the first story. He's and then the second one that you mentioned, the one with Jabar and Dave, that was in the Guardian, is actually started at a Christmas party last winter. I was at home with my parents in Florida, and I went to just this party with him. I was the youngest guy there, just kind of like, you know, talking to family friends, but family friends that I don't really know that well, just kind of been around the family for a long time, but usually I don't interact with them myself. And Dave's brother, so Dave is one of the guys in the American guy in the story. His brother just started telling me about this story. And again, I'll just give you a quick rundown of the story for those, but I encourage you, if you're interested in kind of personal relationship stories, and yeah, check it out. But anyway, it's basically about this guy Dave. He's in the late 1970s, was growing up in Nebraska, decided to go to the Peace Corps, which Patrick, obviously that was one of the first things we kind of talked about back in China. But he decided to go to the Peace Corps and was placed in Kandahar Valley, which is at the time wasn't really known. I mean, Afghanistan, and one of the things he told me was that you know, at that time in the U.S., what people knew about Afghanistan was that it was the first country that came out at the Olympic parade, and that was really the extent to which most Americans knew about this country. So, but anyway, so he picked there, or he got placed there in Kandahar Valley, and didn't know anybody. Started teaching at a high school. Met this, and was pretty lonely. You know, barely spoke Pashto. Met this guy who was another teacher, a young teacher at the high school, and this guy's family really took him in, and you know, they got so comfortable with him that he was allowed to come in. He was allowed to see, you know, the mother and the daughters and the sisters without any coverings, which is you know, kind of I guess a very only the family and close friends have that. I guess ability. So, but the father of Jabar, who's this other teacher, allowed him to do that, and then they lost contact because of the communist revolution in 1978 or 79. They just was too dangerous for them to talk to or Jabar to talk to an American and Dave, and then they reconnected like 20 years later in Germany, kind of came together again, and then. To end the story, back in last September when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, the you know, Jabar's daughters were close to not being able to get out, and Dave, through kind of his contacts from having worked in different organizations with Afghanistan, was able to get them out, and now one of the daughters actually lives 5 minutes away from him in Lincoln, Nebraska. So, or outside of Lincoln, Nebraska. So it was just this kind of, I thought it was cool because it was a personal way to talk about obviously a conflict in the story that as Americans, we hear a lot about. And it was, so I interviewed them separately so I could tell. The Guardian wanted me to write kind of like two separate accounts of the same story and have them fill in each other as they go. And so that was a really cool experience. And I learned a lot just talking to them and hearing about, you know, their stories. But yeah, so those are two of my favorite pieces I think I've done in the last year.
Yeah, I mean, reading through both of them, I feel like I was brought back to Peace Corps with both stories, Nkwain's and with Jabar and David's, because played a lot of basketball while, you know, abroad in Moldova, and met local families like that and became like a brother to, you know, the family and stuff in a lot of ways. But also just seeing, you know, people's perseverance on the ground, you know, floor when you're, you know, in a third world developing nation, whatever it is. But, you know, with Nkwain's story and just where he's at, I was just curious, you know, how good is he? Like, I'm inspired by his training, and I like watching his film, but is this a serious, you know, thing in terms of, you know, his preparations, like second to none, you know, looking up NBA, FIBA coaches, trying to understand like how drills are actually like put together and why. Like, he just goes to a different level, and I feel like he's probably like in the 99th percentile in terms of prep. I'm just wondering, like, just from what you've seen or what you know, like, Is this a serious thing?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. That's something that me and this, you know, kind of director that I was talking with were just discussing a few days ago, and we were trying to put together kind of like a little trailer about him. But we'll see. I don't know. I mean, he one of the things he told me was that he has a lot of people who follow him on Instagram who are coaches at, you know, different levels around the world, basketball coaches, including Phil Handy, who's an LA, you know, handling coach, and Chris Paul's coach as well, or, you know, one of his trainers. So it's not like the people who are telling him, you know, encouraging him aren't legitimate people in their own basketball right. But again, at the end of this, at the same time, it's hard to tell because hasn't really been matched up with anybody of a high caliber. I think what's interesting, and in doing the research for this story, was that, you know, the NBA is really growing in Africa right now. There's a new there's a lot of development camps, especially in Senegal, and there's also this, I forget what it's called. It's the NBA. There's a new league that has, I don't know, maybe 12 teams, 10 teams in the NBA, or sponsored with the NBA. That just started about 1 or 2 years ago. That has a backing of a couple of former NBA players from Africa. I think Mutombo actually is one. Dikembe Mutombo is one of the sponsors, and I think, you know, even you look at a lot of the Nigerian team. There's actually a lot of guys from the Miami Heat played on the Nigerian team, like Precious Achiuwa, who now plays for Toronto, I think. But so I think we're seeing maybe some more guys coming directly from parts of Africa to the NBA than maybe in the past. So I think it's an exciting time. I think the sport's growing, and we'll see like what happens. You know, obviously it's funny because we were looking actually at in the research for this potential film about him, we were looking at Joel Embiid's journey and Pascal Siakam, just because they're also from Cameroon, where Nkwain is from. And both guys were discovered at the same camp when they were like 16, 17. And that camp is run by, I don't even know his name. He was in the NBA until last year. He's playing for the Rockets, but he's only 30, 31. So he has like a 4-part name. That's why I can't think like of it. I don't know. I don't think he's.
Yeah, I forgot. I'll
you know,
Manu. Yeah, forget. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, like I don't think he's ever been kind of like, he's been on I don't know, 4 or 5 different teams in
Al-Farouq Aminu.
Yeah,
Al-Farouq Aminu. Is that right?
I don't know. I think it starts with an L.
Do
but yeah, and he was found at this. They were both found at the same place. So we're like, we got to get in touch with this guy. And then we looked, and he follows Nkwain Kennedy on Instagram. So we'll see. I mean, and I think that, to answer your question in a very long way, is that maybe that will give, once we talk to him, he can kind of, tell if there's some kind of, because Nkwain's 21. You know, that's what a guy who's a junior in college, maybe a senior in college. So it is crazy, but it's not like there's no chance. We'll see.
Yeah. I was just hoping there might be a pathway there. You know, is there a pathway?
I think potentially in Europe too, like, you know,
yeah, I mean, if we watch the movie Hustle, right? Like, if there's any indication, if you have talent, there's going to be some sort of way for you to get to the NBA, hopefully then. But yeah, I think they just need the chance, get that, and then get the development. Because I don't know if he's ever played like organized basketball in like, you know, like a certain league, professional league or semi-pro league. Because I know that's usually how, they get assessed and then they get brought up from that system towards, you know, a higher echelon league, if you will. Probably like FIBA, right? So
yeah, I think, I mean, like I said, this new league that's kind of co-run with the NBA in Africa, maybe that's something that we could facilitate, try to get some kind of tryout. I don't know how it works really, so we're learning as we go. But again, it's very early process, a very early stage of the process.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. I was gonna say, it's kind of crazy that how it's kind of like just happened recently. Like, you would think that after, like Mutombo and all that, like that there would be some, or Hakeem Olajuwon, like there would have been some sort of more influx of like resources to like get NBA players out of there, like, or to go into the college ranks more and develop them more. But yeah, it seems like it's kind of slowly progressed towards that.
Yeah, and I think I mean, this is, I don't know any statistics around this or anything, but when you think of the NBA, I mean, really, like, of the guys who come from outside of the US, mostly it's Eastern European, I mean, European in general, but there's really not like, I mean, I think I think there was a story about the first Indian-born guy getting a college scholarship this year in basketball. I forget where. But yeah, I mean, like, I just think there's probably a lot of untapped talent out there somewhere that is not these core markets that guys come from. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. And I think the Hustle movie, like, as you know, is a good movie. I think it was a little cliche a lot of times, but because I read that originally, actually, it was supposed to be about a Chinese player, but because of the whole thing with NBA and China with LeBron and what's this guy, the GM, they switched it to a Spanish guy.
Yeah, was it Morsi? Or yeah, there was that whole controversy, I think, of like NBA players in China and all. So yeah, and the player is Luke Maba Amute. Yeah, that's who it was.
So, I remember that.
There
guy.
You go. Yeah. So yeah.
Can I ask a question just in terms of how you're facilitating, your content, or, getting a lead and kind of maneuvering it into one of these major publications? Is this something where, you kind of roll up your sleeves and start, going towards pitching stories, or do you get leads from somewhere in order to kind of make all these stories, more notarized and things like that?
Yeah, it's right now it's like 95% pitching. So basically I think as I've, in this last year and a half, 2 years of writing stories, it's, at first I was just like, where the heck do I get ideas? Like, yeah, you can, I mean, everything's an idea really, but like to be able to have something that's, because a lot of times there has to be a newsy hook, like something has to be like, why now is a big question, at least when I'm pitching. It's like, why now, and why should I be the one telling the story? So but I think it's gotten a bit easier now that I've done some more writing. You kind of get to know a few contacts at different publications who, if you write for them one time, then obviously there's a better chance that they'll bring you in again for a different story. But yeah, I think it's really like trying to find why things are relevant at the time that you're pitching them, and then using that to build your portfolio. And then, I mean, the goal hopefully is to write longer form magazine stories that you can kind of go more in depth. Like the Guardian piece that I was talking about, I really like that because there was a really, it's obviously about these two guys, but it's also has, if I had more space, if I had more leeway and stuff that I could write in that story, I would have gone more into the history of or in the backgrounds, but I obviously had a very limited amount of space. So, but I think that comes with time, like that it comes with just being around the, not industry, but like just being able to have those contacts that will trust you with a more in-depth story. And I think that will come along with just writing longer stories as I go along.
Gotcha. So with the Guardian, for example, they kind of had these two, like they had a story kind of ready to be told in a way, like they needed you to do the legwork on that, or you knew about this story, you had that like in the bag, and you
no. So like I heard this story at the Christmas party, and then I went back and I contacted Mike, which is Dave's brother, our family friend. And I said, can I talk to Dave? So Dave and I had an initial conversation for about, I don't know, an hour. And just from that conversation, then I got the gist of the story and I could write up a pitch. Pitches usually, I mean, different writers have different preferences for how long a pitch should be. For that one, I think it was like 2 paragraphs, just explaining the basics of the story. And that's what I sent out to I sent it to a couple of publications. It got rejected, or a lot of times you don't even hear an answer from editors. That's totally normal. And then I just kept pitching, and then got in contact with an editor at The Guardian, and he said, "Hey, this sounds really interesting. Let's talk." So yeah, I mean, I think when you're a staff writer, this from my I haven't ever been on staff at a publication. From what I hear is that if you're a staff writer or you work at a specific publication, a lot of times your editor, they'll get leads. They'll say, "Hey, this is something that came in. Do you want to take this on and like look into it?" But at the stage that I'm at right now, it's basically me just finding stories. And now, like I said, a lot of the stories will come from conversations, little tidbits of information or stories that people tell me, and just in conversation at a bar or something, and then I'll go back and look into it and see like, why is this kind of how can we turn this into a story that's a bit more in depth? Yeah.
What do you usually look for in your stories? Is it like just like something like a different human experience? Because it sounds like these two stories that you wrote here were just like unique circumstances. It's good for, I guess, the social media like clicking and stuff like that. But then there's a lot of depth towards it. I feel like with with Quain, it's like, oh, this person like has a dream, which I think we all do, right? To some degree and all. Then he's like going hard for it, like going head first into just trying to like work out, and then now he has a bunch of like Steph Curry following him. Like, is it just like the human struggle and human experience more so, or kind of just walk me through, I guess, what your thought process is on like how do you look for a good story?
Yeah, I think for me, stories are a lot easier to start from if I have a central character, like someone, and through like with like Nkwain, I think like, again, at this stage in my career, I'm a little bit limited because sometimes you don't have it. They give you 1,000 words and you try to get everything in there. But like I said, if he was a guy that was compelling, he had a following, but when you watch his videos, like you only get very small, he never talks really in them. It's basically just playing basketball. So when I see that, I'm like, wow, this guy probably has a lot more to say. And then when I talk to him, for example, there's this whole civil conflict going on that he has to duck from bullets literally while he's playing basketball on the court. Like, he sent one of the first communications that we had was me. I talked to him. I was like, "Hey, I saw your videos. I want to know more about your journey." And then he sent me this video of him and a friend like walking to the court, and all of a sudden bullets start flying, so they hit the ground. And then sometimes he told me one time on a court, he was literally going from shooting to laying on the clay court for 2 hours straight, waiting for the crossfire to stop. And so, when you send me that, it starts with a question, hey, I want to learn more. And then the most, 99% of the people who are watching his videos have no idea that is what's happening before and after he actually shoots those little short videos. And then, if I had, like I said, if I had more time or more space to write a longer story, I would have gone into more about this conflict, how are other people affected in his country, but it all would lead back to him. And so, yeah, so that I think that's what it is. Like, it starts with the person, but then through that person, what kind of more broader, deeper story can you tell on different levels that kind of fill out the character that he or she is, like another one that I did actually for Business Insider was about this guy who he's an astronaut. He just returned in April, but he's basically the guy who's the American who's been off of the Earth consecutively for like 365 days. I think it was something like that. I think it was a year. And again, it was like right now I want to work with him again and do really like a longer piece, because when I was interviewing him, they wanted kind of like a day in the life of an astronaut, which is interesting in itself. And there were some interesting tidbits that came out in our conversation, but, in my research, just prepping for it, basically like when he was up there, the Russian war in Ukraine started. And there was actually like I forget what the position of the guy was, but like some higher up in Russian government who is threatening to leave Mark, this American astronaut, in the space station, because the space station is run by the Russians with the US, but I think they were in the Russian part or something like that. But this guy had posted this video saying, we're going to leave the American astronaut up there. And, you know, in our interview, we didn't even get to touch on that because we were talking more about the angle, which was more the day-to-day. And so I was like, wow, that is really interesting. You know, like I would love to hear about that. So maybe we'll revisit it at some point. But yeah, I mean, that's the one thing. Like they always say, you have to kill your darlings. You know, you can't really when you're talking to someone, you hear a lot of stuff that just doesn't make it into the piece because it's just too much, which is a good problem to have, I think. But a lot of times, I think most writers would say, "Oh, I can go a lot longer if I had the chance." But yeah, so that's another cool piece. And actually, one of my favorite points was that I was asking him like what his day-to-day was like. So we started with a very kind of basic question, you know, like I said, from the time you get up to the time you go to sleep, what is your schedule? And at one point he just telling me that he started like meditating, and he told me the story where he basically would meditate next to this window in the space station that just overlooked Earth. Like that was what he would just stare at as he meditated. And he actually got kind of choked up talking to me on the interview because and I just got goosebumps actually just saying that, because I was like, that is just, you know, imagine that, like less than 0.001% of the people to ever exist will have that experience. And to be able to talk to that guy, even though it was a piece about day-to-day life, like that was really cool. So
yeah. I was gonna say, it's like, you know, I did a meditation thing at work this Friday, but it was just like staring at like a YouTube video of a waterfall or something like that.
Yeah,
and he's got the entire Earth.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. I was like, that's insane. I mean, I meditate, and I was like, wow. I think I would just, it would be cool.
Yeah. Do you like long form content better than like some of the short form? I mean, just given your background, sounds like, you know, with social media and such, like everything's put together in like 90-second, 15-second clips, right? Versus that, which is why I appreciate like things like podcasting, right? It's like you can hear a conversation, you know, between two people that are knowledgeable about a certain thing, or maybe not even knowledgeable, they're just, you know, having a good conversation about some sort of subject or interesting topic while you're, you know, doing some work here and there or cooking and stuff like that. Just curious, like your take on like how that kind of affects like, I guess, the journalistic integrity with like people's attention spans and all that, versus like, you know, oh, here's all the information, here's the backstories, here's the sub stories, all that. Just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I think for one, I won't say that I don't like. I'm not a person, or I am a person who still goes on Instagram, you know, goes on Twitter, has these bite size. I think I'm, you know, I'm not like this, you know, wise person who only will sit down for 1 hour reading sessions or anything like that at all. So I do like the short stuff, but yeah, I think like for example, there's this podcast from Vox called the Long Form Podcast, and they used to be independent, but they just got acquired by Vox this year. But they just talk to different journalists, magazine writers, now kind of podcasters as well, about their processes. And recently I was listening to one by this guy. What is it? I tweeted about it. It's his name's Sam. 1 second. His name is Sam Anderson. And he's done a lot of cool profiles, you know, like he did one about the writer Haruki Murakami, who I really like, Russell Westbrook. But the one he talked a lot about was the one about Kevin Durant, that came out last year, I don't know, in the New York Times magazine, which if you guys haven't read it, I didn't read it until after listening to this podcast, but it's an amazing piece because, you know, this is a really long piece, so sit down in a chair and like give yourself some time to read it, but it's really worth it because the first page is just him talking about how the earth was created, and I was like, how the hell is this going to relate to Kevin Durant? And the way he brings it back is crazy. He's a writer who's been covering, like, he covered the Thunder when Harden and Westbrook and Durant were there together, and he actually also has a book which I haven't read, but I will now, called Boomtown, which is like, it's a book that supposedly has like alternating chapters about how the city of Oklahoma City came to be, and then the other chapters are about the Thunder and the team. So supposedly it's a really cool kind of dual narrative where he talks about the Thunder but uses them to tell a bigger story about the city and the Sooners and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, so so he's known Durant for a while, and he basically goes and after all this other stuff, in the middle of the piece, he hangs out with Kevin Durant at Kevin Durant's like office, and he's like, what do you want to talk about? Or Durant asks him, what do you want to talk about? And this guy, Sam Anderson, is like, the meaning of life, kind of just as a joke. And Durant's like, oh, cool, like no one ever asked me about that. And then they start talking about the meaning of life and just like all this other stuff that Durant, because he's obviously typecast as like just an NBA guy. Well, not so much anymore, but most NBA guys are seen as only people who can just talk about sports, right? But he's in, and they talk about the story of Durant growing up and his family, and it's just a really cool piece that, like I said, just starts with something about the creation of the world, and you're like, how the hell is this going to bring back to Durant? So I would check that out. And if anybody's listening who likes more in-depth stories about sports people, like he's really good. I haven't read the Russ profile yet, but I will.
So Steph, what's the meaning of life?
I'm supposed to ask you that. I'm not used to being on this side of the mic.
That's good. Can I ask about that though? Because when we first got to know each other, we were at University of South Carolina, both pursuing business degrees, things like that, and it's kind of where we moved into our study abroad, to China, for academics, but also I think for some experience and just to kind of be on a new continent or new country if either of us hadn't been there at the time. But what got you from maybe having more of a business mindset to kind of more on the content side of things? Like, what is your journey? And I guess maybe talk about some of your purpose in what you're ultimately trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were in China, I was still still trying to figure it out, obviously, like most people. But when we came back from China, I graduated from South Carolina, and then went to Chicago for a year and worked as a advertising salesperson, like basically making 75 calls a day to small businesses, which wrecked me. Like that was definitely the worst year of my life. It wasn't all bad. I met some really cool people at the job, but I just didn't see myself in that environment. And so when I moved to San Francisco, I started working as a producer in kind of different digital agencies. So I was around more like creative people, which I thought was a bit better. But then, I was working as a producer for a while, and then I said, I don't want to be managing creative people. Like I feel like I can do this, and I want to do it myself. And so I mean, growing up, like I have a twin brother, and we used to make documentaries and short films with our cousins, and we went to we won some film festivals, very small film festivals, in our town, and so it was there. I just kind of like never really saw it as an opportunity that I could progress in professionally. I did because with business and with these kinds of careers, it's like you're like, okay, you have the internship, then you get the job, then you get the next job, then you get promoted, and it was a more like linear path that you could see other people in our business school following. So that was just kind of when I came out of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I was like, okay, I'll just start that and see what happens. But then after 4 years or so of working, I was like, no, this isn't it. And so when I came to Berlin, I actually decided I applied to this school in Berlin right before the pandemic. Well, a few months before the pandemic hit. I accepted it the month before the pandemic hit. So I knew I was going to come to Berlin. And when I came here, still didn't know. And then I I mean, I had always liked writing. Like my dad and mom both used to be journalists in different capacities. My mom worked for, actually, my mom worked for ESPN a long time ago. We lived in Connecticut for a few years because of that. And my dad is more like on the editing, but also did freelance writing when he was. So it was in the, the atmosphere of possibility for me. Like nobody in my family or my immediate family is good at math or science. We're all like, my sister's trying to be an actress right now. Like, my brother's a musician. And my other brother plays soccer at Boston University. So everything was like creative or athletic. Nothing was technical or, that kind of stuff. And so then then I decided to come, and then I was actually the first winter in Berlin. So December 2020, I was supposed to come back for Christmas to Florida, and you might have heard of the German bureaucracy is absolute worst. So I didn't have my residence permit that I could come back into the country if I had left. So I actually got stuck here, and it was we had a second lockdown in Germany. And so basically I just started reading and watching stuff, and I watched a show called Borgen. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's like this amazing show about the hypothetical or theoretical first female prime minister of Denmark. Now there's actually been a real one, but when the show was made in 2012 or ish, around there, there hadn't been. And there's this one character who's a journalist, and it was so cool. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. So that winter, I just started reaching out to some people that I knew in the world, in the journalism world, started pitching. And then from then on, and then it was kind of hard for a while, because it was like, you really have to start at a very small, like no one's going to give you a chance. I wrote a few things for my student newspaper and then used that to pitch. And then, this summer or late spring, early summer, just this last year, that's things started to pick up with these bigger publications. So, but it was, for a year, it was kind of like in and out of motivation and that kind of thing. But now I think I'm honestly like the most happiest I've ever been professionally by far. So I think it was kind of a very roundabout way, but I think the writing was always on the wall for me, that I was going to come back to some kind of thing more creative. And it's cool because now I never get tired, because all these stories are so different from each other. So I'm just never, never bored, I guess.
What's it like living in Berlin compared to like places in the U.S. or what's it like living like abroad in Europe and Germany?
Well, at first it was a bit tough because I had to answer the Trump question for like the first 3-4 months.
It travels with you everywhere, anywhere we've ever been, I feel like, but not
it really does. And I remember like I was with my friend Maddie, who's was also in Berlin, but she is an American from California. And we were together on the day that finally they announced that Biden, like, after all the counting and stuff. And we were just sitting like on the steps of some random like street having a beer. And this guy, he's probably like 60, 70 German guy. I guess he heard us talking, heard that we were American. He's like, congratulations, guys, like you're done with him or something like that. And it was just like, oh, finally, But I will say that not the new thing, but something that I never thought would follow me to the US follow me to Europe that has, is the Florida Man myth. You guys know about Florida Man? No.
Go ahead.
So I'll give you a quick synopsis. Basically, the Florida Man, there's a joke that say, if you go on Google and you put Florida Man and then your birthday, there is a news story about some weird thing that a Florida man has done on that day. And it really, I don't know when it got so big. Like when I was a kid, I remember thinking like, oh, Florida's pretty cool. Like we have Disney, we have the beach. Everybody thinks we're like, if you're from Florida, it's kind of like being from California. Like it's cool, just generally. And now it's crazy. Like so many people from all parts of Europe, that I talk to here, if they hear I'm from Florida, they're like, "Oh, you're a Florida man. Like, that's crazy. Like, do you?" And I don't know. There's just if you look it up, there's just so many weird stories about men from Florida. So actually, I think my Twitter profile is like the good kind of Florida man or something like that, or like changing the Florida man narrative since '93 or something like that. But anyway, what was I think the question was how I was living in Berlin. But anyway, so once we got past the Trump thing, it's actually been really nice. I mean, Berlin, I don't know if you guys have been, but Berlin is, from what I've heard and seen from my other trips to other places in Germany, is not really Germany. It's kind of this oasis that's very, culturally liberal and a lot more open than most places you're going to have in Germany. But overall, I really enjoy it. I think I will stay in Europe for a while. I do like the flexibility of being able to go to like another country within a few hours on a train and just going to a different language, different people, all that kind of stuff. And the trains are really nice, actually. We don't really have that trains as much. And it's just something nice about getting to the train station like 10 minutes before and then sitting down, going through no security. And then even if it's 7 hours, it's still like shorter than a journey anywhere on a plane for most cases, with going to the airport and all that kind of stuff. So I like the flexibility of that.
Yeah, it's not as like cramped as a plane, I feel like, and
yeah,
Wi-Fi is I think better, I feel like, and I don't know. Yeah, have you been to Switzerland yet? Because like Lucerne's one of my favorite spots, I would say. Yeah, especially if you like hiking or anything like that. So
no, I haven't been to Switzerland yet. I'll tell you a funny story though. It was in Netherlands. I was going to Amsterdam 3 weeks ago for this podcast festival. And in Germany, they have this law, like we still have to wear masks on any kind of public transportation or transportation really in general. And so the first like 3-4 hours on this train, we had to wear masks. And then as soon as we cross the Dutch border, they're like, okay, everybody, you can take your masks off. And it was like, we'd just been sitting here. And so on the way back, we didn't have to wear the mask for the first 4 hours. And then we had to put them on, even though we were with the same exact people for like 4 hours before that. It's just like, this is crazy.
Maybe the United States will slowly adapt to that, over time or something like that, just given how, partisan things are getting. But yeah, I mean, I was going to make a note just, when I was in Moldova, just how great that was to just buy, a cheap train ticket or plane ticket or what have you. And it's like instantly you're in a new country. And I feel like every 3 months I'd try to plan a new trip. So I'd save like of the $300 I was making a month through Peace Corps, I would like put 150 aside and then just have all my basics covered and stuff. And It's just great, man. Once you get there, it's like, you think of Europe and all these countries as being so distant, based on, what we experience in the United States. But when you actually get there, it's like the land that you're covering is like maybe half the United States or something like that. So it's at least on the Western and maybe Central side, but no, it's super nice.
No.
So it's awesome.
I mean, for Florida, like we, coming from Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, we had to drive 6-7 hours just to get out of Florida. And here you could be like, I don't even know where you could be in Denmark or something, just the same amount of distance. So,
and then the culture just shifts rapidly, country to country. So it's like what you're actually experiencing is pretty mind blowing. So it's cool.
Yeah, exactly. So,
do you miss anything in the US at the moment?
Chick-fil-A. That's usually the first stop when I come back. Yeah, Chick-fil-A for sure. There's something else. I don't know, but I mean that's when anybody asks me, like that's definitely the first thing that comes to mind.
Are you a sauce guy? Like I always felt like there were sauces I just could not get, and it was like my food would just be the same kind of mashup together, and it was like the options were like ketchup and like some spices. I was just like, do you have any like I don't know if you experienced stuff like that, but just curious.
I mean, even with Chick-fil-A sauce, I didn't eat it for the first 3-4 years that I had Chick-fil-A. I don't know, the smell or something I didn't like, and then I tried it, and I was like, it was just like, how was I doing this for that long without this sauce? I mean,
I've got a bottle.
There's this falafel. I like, so basically in California, I used to eat like burritos like 3 days a week. Now I eat falafel sandwiches like 3 days a week. And there's this place which I've discovered. I guess there's a bunch of different places, but they do they're Sudanese, and the Sudanese style falafel is with a peanut sauce, like heavy peanut sauce all over the falafel sandwich, and that thing is amazing. So if you're ever in Berlin, you got to go to Sahara Falafel. That's the place to go.
Is it as good as the John Bing from Shanghai?
Oh, different competitions. That's this is a lunch and dinner, so I'm not even going to try to compare them.
What was it, like a quarter?
Those are so good.
Like a quarter too. I felt like it was just like a quarter 50 cents. It was like, bang, I got breakfast. It was awesome.
Yeah. Remember there was those two guys, that was a man and the woman that competed, and I think you would go to the woman, I would go to the man. That are awesome, right? Remember that?
Yeah, everybody had their person. I feel like
you had your loyalty for sure.
She spoke to me in a way I can't even explain it, but might have been the extra egg or the crunchy bread or whatever it was. Man, she just did it the right way.
Is there a German food you love the most?
To be honest, I feel like in Berlin you don't even eat that much German food. Like the falafel, because there's a huge there's a big Turkish community in Berlin, there's a big Syrian community in Berlin. So I just think like the standard for a lot of, I don't know, like millennial people who aren't German who live here is like that is the day-to-day cheap good stuff, I think if you go to Munich, other parts, then it would be different. But I mean, there's this thing called Käsespätzle, like cheese. I don't know. It's basically like a glorified mac and cheese
noodle.
Yeah, which is good, but it's if there's any food that I tell people to go to when they're here, it's like the falafels for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I think we can move on to Miami. I mean, we've talked about food. I know it's dinner time closer to you, so I don't want to like kill your. I feel like we're sprucing your appetite a lot. So, but curious. We know you're a Florida man and all that. Curious, who's your favorite Heat player of all time?
That's a good question. The obvious answer is Dwayne Wade. We moved to Chicago the same year, me and him. So we were there. When I was growing up, though, it was definitely Udonis Haslem. I mean, he's still up there, but it's funny because when you see Udonis, he's 40, I think now, 41. And when he gets in the game, there's, a lot of Heat fans will kind of make this big commotion, like, oh, he's kind of like this novelty guy. Which it's kind of like more it's like when a guy like Taco Fall or Boban comes in, people are more which is cool, but at the same time, Boban and Taco, I think Boban's better than Taco that he plays, but so I get their appeal, they're these big guys who kind of goofy, really nice. But then, so I get that when people cheer them on. But when a guy like Udonis comes on and that happens, I don't know. I feel like a little bit of disrespect for him, even though I know that's not the intention. But when you remember how he used to be, that guy is just they call him the OG. He was the hardest working guy, was undrafted out of Florida, went overseas. So I don't know. I get a little irked when people kind of go over the top in the cheering with him. But anyway, so Udonis is always my favorite growing up. And then Dwayne too. But I'm trying to think of someone maybe who's a little less common that is up there. And I'm trying to think. I really liked, me and my brother, my twin, we used to watch a lot. We used to like this guy, Keon Dooling. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
I think he's actually a coach now somewhere.
Interesting.
I knew he used to play for the Clippers for a bit. I think that's where he got drafted, but yeah, I remember he joined the Heat. So
yeah, he's from Fort Lauderdale too. He's a coach on the Jazz now. Big Jazz Heat connection these days with Dwayne and stuff, but yeah. But I remember watching, me and my brother had one of our first, like, I don't know, presents that I remember getting as a kid was this signed Alonzo Mourning. And we're twins, so we always used to get split presents or whatever. We had this signed Alonzo Mourning jersey, which we still have at home. Actually, my little brother, he's 22, his middle name is Alonzo because he was born when Alonzo was like the main guy. And my parents changed the Z to an S to make it a bit more Italian to kind of fit with our family name. But the actual inspiration is Alonzo Mourning.
It's pretty cool. I was going to make a point on Haslem too. It's kind of nice is that I think he's on a vet minimum contract and he's just kind of like kept repeating that over time. But it's like he kind of does two things. He's probably like the practice leader, you know, a guy who understands how to be a professional. You also get like a coach out of him too. It's kind of like you get a lot of things when you sign up a guy like Udonis. So, you know, I think with like you were talking about Taco and Boban, it's like if those guys' names were John and Eugene, they wouldn't be half as interesting, you know, but it's like Udonis in general, I think serves a really smart purpose. And I think a lot of NBA teams would be wise to like keep a veteran like that around just because he's good for culture.
For sure. And I mean, he's played his whole career with the Heat, which, you know, even a guy like Dwayne can't say anymore. And I mean, I think, I don't know if you remember, I think it was last year, 2 years ago. I mean, Udonis never plays, but he came in and then within 3 minutes, he like got in a fight with Dwight Howard and was ejected and just changed the whole stadium. And I was like, I mean, that's how you use a guy who's like number 4, whatever, 13, 14 on your bench, you know? But yeah, I agree. Like, I think no one in the Heat organization has more respect than maybe than Pat Riley, but then Udonis, you know?
Yeah. I feel it's like, all right, who can get suspended here and not give it, you know, not care as much, right? It's like, oh, the young people, they don't want to have like a bad stigma, but this older gentleman here that's been in the league, has won rings, you know, he's good. Let's just put him in there and knock some heads around. I feel like, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we have nothing to lose. I think, you know, if you put him in for 2-3 minutes and just change he just has this intensity that has always been there. That I think people just appreciate, and like if he's around, like you got to be serious, you know. So.
Yeah, and he's kind of he's that bridging a gap between the with the Dwayne Wade and Shaq type of era with what's currently happening right now, and yeah, it's like you look at the Miami Heat roster. I feel like right now, right? It's there's some drafted here players, like Tyler Herro, I guess, like lottery picks, but then like for the most part, they're all just people that didn't come highly touted out of college and are kind of just grinders. And I feel like that's I think the Miami Heat's like persona, right? And I think Udonis Haslem kind of like fits that and is like that, like he's kind of the heart in a sense of like what they're all about. So that makes sense that he's there.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's kind of a shame because when I first moved here to Berlin, it was when the bubble was happening, and I would get up every night at like 2-3 a.m. and watch the games. It's harder to do that during the regular season, but once playoffs come around, I do. And yeah, it's nice that the season's back because every time I wake up now, I have some highlights to watch, and the Heat finally got the first win yesterday against the Raptors, so. I think I'm excited for this year. I think I don't know. I still think that we could win the East. I think it's crazy to me with ESPN. I don't know if you ever see like their rankings and there was this whole thing last year where we were like the best team in the East at one point or the second best, and ESPN put their contenders, dark horses, in the hunt, and we were like the third category down. The Heat, just no one respects the Heat until the playoffs come around, and they're like, oh yeah, the Heat are good, just because we don't have. I mean, we have Jimmy, but we don't have a Giannis or any of these big names. But I think, Jimmy. That's why Jimmy fits with the Heat too. He's also. It is cool to see how he's finally found his team. After playing with. The Sixers and the Bulls and stuff. I think I would like for Jimmy to retire as a Heat with a champ. I think he deserves a championship for sure.
Yeah, I mean, well, he was with the Timberwolves for a hot second, right? And
Oh,
then-
true, yeah.
and they're like, you don't fit in here. You try too hard. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. And then now, yeah, was it in Timberwolves? They got Gobert, and then they just lost to the Utah Jazz, right? It was like, didn't you just traded like a bunch of picks and stuff like that, and you still lost? Like, yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
No,
But Patrick, you're a Bulls guy, right? Wayne, are you also a Bulls guy?
I'm a Bulls guy.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, you guys, we had our season opener against you guys, right?
Oh yeah.
I think we won.
Yeah,
you did. Yeah.
No,
sorry.
no. I just, I mean,
was that a question or a statement?
I was like, it's only like 3 games in. You should know.
yeah. No, kind of a subtle dig, but anyways, no, I think both those teams are kind of comparable at this point. It's like I can see where we have the potential and star power to take that leap. I think the Bulls' bugaboos has just been injuries. Like last year, we got out to a really hot start. Then Caruso goes down. We had, it seemed like Levine was in and out a little bit. Wayne could probably speak to more, from what he observed too. But it's just like, I like what we have when fully healthy. Lonzo Ball would have been a huge lift if we had him all year. And again, like we're without him to start the year again. So it's just like you get this momentum going and, some real professionals, throughout our rotation. It's just like, are we good enough to stack up against a young emerging Celtics team that's extremely deep, or, the Bucks are still, solid with Giannis and their casts as well. But, I think the Heat and Bulls are kind of like on a similar wavelength. It's just like, who's willing to take that step?
Yeah. I think the Bulls are just injuries definitely plays the part. Like Lonzo Ball's like I think he's been like the key factors because he plays good defense, can pass the ball, like can shoot threes. So I think that kind of person is just essential, I think, for the Bulls. But yeah, I mean it's definitely like different from the Heat. It's like we draft players like Patrick Williams like 4th overall, but then it's like you look at the Heat, it's like what. Max Strus and all.
He's a Chicago guy too.
He went to DePaul, yeah.
He went
to Pat and I's alma mater. So, just like
really,
players like that. Yeah. Like he's kind of like heralded. It's like, oh, we got one in the league, right now. So
yeah. It's interesting because I think what makes the Strus story like extra interesting is how he kind of displays Duncan Robinson. He kind of fills a better role. He plays better defense though than Duncan, and like I don't know. I think most Heat fans really like Duncan, but I don't know. It just kind of he used to be someone I was talking about, and then he kind of just faded. And
his podcast.
I don't know if it's that's what I was about to say. I don't know. He's kind of like it's like he got the big contract, started a podcast, and then just kind of faded out. I don't know. I could see. I mean, he has a big contract, so I don't know if we'll like be able to move him. But we'll see. But it is cool. I mean, it is cool to root for a team that like has these guys who are just, it's not like we had not the original super team, although some people say that we did. It's like people forget about the Celtics before us, like before LeBron and Bosh came down here. But it is cool to have a team that we're pretty, we're just built from like all these random guys who come in, but I think the time's ticking. I think obviously Lowry is already, I think he's got like, I don't know, 3 years left or something. So we'll see.
How did you feel about the Herro extension?
I really like Tyler Herro. I think he was the 6th man year. Like, I think he needs to start though. I think at some point to get him to the next level. Like, I think he was fine. He's like, I'll win 6th man and then I'll prove myself. But I think if he doesn't get into one of the main rotation spots, like because he's the guy on the Heat with the biggest ego. I think he does, like, because there's a guy like Haslem and Jimmy there, he won't kind of show too much of that. But I think if you compress that ego too much, it might explode. And that's why I think he needs to have the shot to really be like the number 1 guy, even number 2 guy. Well, yeah, I guess behind Bam Jimmy, but like I think he could be, you know, the number. Him and Bam are the future of the Heat for sure.
I mean, he's definitely a second piece, third piece on a, you know,
Yeah.
strong playoff contender or whatever it is. If he's got any weaknesses, maybe it's on the defensive end or size or something like that, but you can mask that by, you know, signing the right guys or drafting the right types of players to complement, you know, his skill set. But he gets dogged a lot. I mean, I feel like they kind of, you know, slight him for some reason. I'm still like, he put up 25 and 5, you know, last year, and he's coming off the bench, and he does have a lot of swagger. Like when they were in the bubble, I thought he really showed out, and so did Duncan. At that point, you know, maybe teams started to, you know, target them on the defensive side. Maybe that's why they've, you know, gotten some shade in that respect. But I still think, you know, with the core you just spoke about, if they just get, you know, I think the loss of PJ Tucker was huge for you guys, just to not have that veteran stabilizer, you know, somebody's playoff, you know, ready and things like that around. But you just keep filling in those holes, and I think you guys are, you know, ready to compete for conference titles.
Yeah, I was really sad. Like, it's funny. I've never shifted so much from hating a guy to loving a guy as with PJ Tucker. Like Jimmy was up there, even Kyle Lowry. But like the Heat and the Raptors used to have a little bit of a thing, but PJ, I think me and my brother and my dad just like, or my brothers and my dad just hated that guy, and now that we loved him for a year and then he was gone again. So now it's like I don't even know where my relationship lies with PJ Tucker anymore.
He's gotta have like the sweetest gig. I feel like it's like you just sit in the corner and then shoot threes and then just play really good defense, and then that's basically all. And then like that's the NBA these days, and you know,
and I mean I think he fit in Miami so much because he's a flashy guy. He's got all these shoes, like, you know, fresh new outfit I'm like, and then he's on in Philadelphia now, right? And I'm like, I don't know. Why would you go to Philadelphia if you live in Miami?
It seems like they were willing to pay him into his 40s, and they gave him a hefty cut.
No,
you know, it's like, you know, I
get it.
Like,
buy more shoes.
Yeah. like if Oklahoma City came calling and they're like, "Hey, man, we want you to, you know, play for 2 or 3 times your worth." It's like, yeah, sure. Like, put me in Russia. I don't know, wherever you want to, you know, me to go, I'll go.
Oh, Russia, you don't want to go.
Maybe not. I mean, I wouldn't want to. Yeah,
China, I think is fine, but Russia, I don't know.
Yeah, no doubt. But no, it was great talking to you. You know, on this show, we usually do a final thought. So maybe if you want to kick it off, we'll all give around a final thoughts, and we'll close out.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. Like I said, I don't think I've ever guested on a podcast, so it was cool to be on this side of the mic. And you know, I'll give a final thought with a recommendation. I saw that movie Triangle of Sadness last night. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It just won like the Cannes Film Festival. It's like 2.5, 3 hours long, and it's very, very good. And I would definitely see in the theater. Triangle of Sadness. But yeah, with that, I think I'll probably call it now and say the Heat are going to finish second in the East and go to the finals again this year. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I love the boldness. My final thought actually has nothing to do with sports, but this is for Wayne on Friday night. Sitting back, it was late at night, you know, finished up with dinner and everything like that. And was over at the grocery store right before I got home, and I picked up a Dutch apple pie. I was like, you know what? I'm grabbing this Dutch apple pie right now because, you know, we like to talk desserts on this show. We like to talk food and everything like that. But man, that really just hit the spot. Just, you know, nice slice, heated it up, did a la mode too with some caramels. It was just magical. But I guess I want to kick it over to Stefano because, you know, we just love to know what your favorite type of pie is, if you're a pie guy at all.
Very big pie guy, but I think I would even delve a little bit deeper and say more of an apple crumble guy.
Okay.
More than pies. But I will say the biggest change in my holiday diet in the last 15 years came about a few years, like maybe 3 years ago, when I discovered pumpkin pie. I always thought I hated it. It was the same thing with the Chick-fil-A sauce, like avoided it. And then once I had it one time, like was forced onto me for some reason, then I said, how have I ever lived without this at this time of the year? So yeah, I think I would say maybe pumpkin pie overall.
if you ever get a chance to try pumpkin cheesecake, actually, I think it's better than like a good pumpkin pie. I don't know what I think it's like that smoothness added to the pumpkin and like the cinnamon type of flavor. I feel like it balances well off or whatever, like that fattiness and the pumpkinish cinnamon flavors. It just meshes well. So definitely would recommend that. But
yeah,
yeah.
And just for perspective, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I thought we were still on pie, so I was like, figured I'd throw it out there. But just a shout, just a shout out Stefano's home state. My favorite pie is key lime pie. I just love the graham cracker crust, love key limes, things like that. I went to Key West a year ago. Not that I went there for that or anything. It was a wedding, but just had some real stuff from the place it originates from. That's always great. And then pecan pie was my favorite fall pie when Wayne and I were talking last episode. But with that, if there are no other thoughts on dessert, that's my final thought.
Yes, my final thought would be happy Filipino-American History Month to all the Filipinos out there. And enjoy some good food and good company and some lumpia and all that. So yeah. All right.
Well, with that, this has been the Ball and Breakfast podcast with special guest Stefano Montali. We will be back next week to break down week 7 of the NFL, baseball playoffs, and perhaps put together a basketball preview prediction show. So with that, take care all, and we'll catch you next time.